Hello, everybody. Thanks again for visiting my YouTube channel. This is the place where we discuss the Lord's Recovery Movement of Witness Lee, also known as the local church movement. Well, I have not made a video in months. I've been very busy doing other things. I think my last video that I made was one of my best. A lot of times I'll make a video and I think, okay, this is the finish. This is all they need to hear. But we do have the phenomenon of shepherdingwords.com, where the Blended Brothers, the co-workers in the Lord's Recovery in North America, regularly post their dominating propaganda. They put out some articles back in August, one in September, but the first one they put out in August of 2023 was called Caring for Both the Headship of Christ and the Fellowship of the Body. Now, once again, this is them trying to assert their authority and trying to tell people that they need to submit to them and they need to obey them. And this has gotten so ridiculous where 75% at least of their articles are about them asserting their authority and trying to stamp out rebellions and murmurings and all this stuff. This is, to me, pretty telling. The fact that they're constantly trying to say they have authority and people need to listen to them and their equation of their movement with the body of Christ and the Lord's recovery with the church to try to get you confused in your brain that they have some kind of authority over you. Let me tell you, they have no authority over you. They have no authority over me. They have no authority over anybody who's not in their movement. And the only reason they have authority over people that are in their movement is because those people have chosen to be in their movement. Their movement is not the church. Their movement is not the body of Christ. It's a part of it, but that organization, that movement is nothing, nothing, nothing but an organization of people. And I would say that's true for every Christian organization. Now, that may come as a shock to you, but those are my conclusions based on what I've learned in my life experience. Okay, where does the organic church pick up and where does it leave off? The organic church is the body of Christ. The Lord's Spirit is in it. He leads us through His Spirit in our spirit and through speakings from others. Okay, but where's the authority in that structure? Where is it? It's totally with God. There's no authority in the body of Christ other than God. There's authority in smaller congregations of the body of Christ because those are organizations. And the Lord's Recovery is an organization. So basically what the Lord's Recovery does is try to convince people that their organization is the equivalent of the church and the body of Christ. And the authorities in their organization are the equivalent of authorities in the body of Christ. This is the thing that they've been believing since the very beginning, that they're the church. That's all they are is the church. That's all they can be is the church. So they are the church. So therefore, the authorities in their organization are also authorities in the church, which means they have authority over you because you're in the church, right? So you have to submit to authority in the church, right? And so they are the authorities. And this is the game they're playing. And it's nonsense. Because how do they know that somebody outside their organization isn't an authority in the body of Christ that has authority over them? Well, they would just scoff and say, because we got the revelation and Witness Lee was our leader and we have more spirituality than everybody. So therefore, we are they. We are they. It's this game of trying to recreate this universal church in a subset of the church. But in fact, the universal church does not have authorities like that. We had apostles back in the day. And I've explained several times that apostles were specially commissioned men who had been with Jesus, who had been appointed by Jesus, who were commissioned with spreading the gospel and establishing the truth before the New Testament was canonized. Now here comes the Lord's Recovery in this article They do their usual first few paragraphs of spilling out general purpose Christian truths about the body of Christ. And then they do their 30,000 foot drop down to their level and say, now this is us. This is what we're doing. It's funny. They have a sentence here, I believe, in the third paragraph, starting near the middle. Such is the case when the fellowship or expressions of concern from other churches are reconsidered as outside interference that undermines the headship of Christ. The same is true when a brother asserts that there is an impenetrable boundary around the local church's administration and that, now listen to this, quote, those who function as apostles among us, who are outside of that church's leadership, have no right to touch local matters. Those who function as apostles, they don't even have the nerve to say they're apostles. They say they function as apostles. Well, how do you decide when somebody functions as an apostle? Who decides? They're asserting it, so therefore you have to believe it. Why? Because it's all in the context of their sandbox where they're trying to pretend they're the whole body of Christ. And they're trying to pretend they're back in the first century where there were real apostles who had to speak to the churches directly because there was no New Testament. Things have changed. That function doesn't exist anymore. 1 Corinthians 12:12 says that real apostles can work signs and wonders. Okay, that's their calling card. These don't have them. So guys that can't function by doing signs and wonders cannot function as apostles. These guys are just assuming a position to control their movement and to get you to shut up and do what they say and stay in line and occupy a seat and give money so they can continue doing what they're doing. They got to try to get you to continue going to their group. This is an age-old scam. It happens in every generation. Somebody claims to be some kind of spiritual leader with authority telling you what to do. They have no authority over anybody. If you go to work for the Living Stream Ministry, then Ron Kangas is your boss. And if he tells you to make coffee, I guess you got to make coffee or quit. Well, guess what? It's the same thing in a church or ministry. You go to work for a ministry or church, you do what the leaders say until you say, I don't want to be here anymore, and I think the Lord is happy with me leaving. Goodbye. And that's the end of it. And that's the end of their authority. Don't believe anything else. You know why? Because if you believe this model, and if it's so obvious biblically as they want you to believe, then everybody would be making this claim. Everybody would be claiming to have the spiritual authority in the body of Christ that they claim to have. And everybody would be tightening the screws on their membership by that excuse. And guess what? The Lord's people and the Lord's body would suffer. This is not the way authority works in the New Testament. I believe this more than I ever have. It took me a long time to come to these conclusions because all churches operate this way. All churches have a line of authority. And you get in that church and yeah, you got to respect it. But these guys had the brilliant notion of thinking, okay, we'll just say our church or our movement is the body and there's no other body outside of us because there's only one body. Therefore, our guys who function as apostles have the authority to come into your local church and mess with your local matters. No, they don't. It doesn't work that way. And it doesn't need to. This is what's so crazy about these guys is they really think they're protecting the Lord's body by continually and constantly and unendingly asserting their authority over people. They need to stop doing it, and you need to stop listening to them. I say this with love in my heart for them. These guys were scammed just like a lot of people, but now they succumbed to the scam. They were victims of a corrupt view, and now they've embraced the corrupt view. Why are they doing that? Is it because they're trying to be faithful to the Lord? I guess they've convinced themselves of that. But isn't it interesting how their being faithful to the Lord also continues the organization which pays them? There's nothing wrong with being prosperous as a servant of the Lord and the Lord rewarding you for your labor. That's between you and Him. But When you start telling people that you have authority over them and that results in their doing something that funds you more than you would have been if you hadn't have said it, then as far as I'm concerned, you're a scam artist. Think about that sentence I read. Those who function as apostles among us. Now that among us speaks volumes. What's the among us? The among us is their organization. The among us is their movement. Okay, and they're trying to pretend that their movement has cosmic proportions which equate to God's entire purpose, and therefore they carry the weight of authority that the most authoritative spiritual figures in history had, like Paul or Peter. Again, where's the evidence? Where's the mark of the apostle? Where is it? I don't see it. Sorry. I mean, the Bible never says an apostle is somebody who has a lot of revelation and knows God's economy. It doesn't say that. If you read what apostles did and what they were, it's clear they were specially commissioned men. And it's also clear they were miraculously gifted as evidence, as a mark of their true apostleship. So that's the Lord's wisdom. He didn't want anybody just going around saying they were apostles, and he certainly didn't want people going around saying they function as apostles, which implies they have the authority of an apostle. Because if you can do that, then anybody can do it. And who's to deny it? Well, the only way you can deny it is by making the case I'm making, that there are no more apostles. And we can't have in the church, in the body of Christ, at this late date, people popping up and claiming to be apostles and claiming to have this authority. You know, these guys haven't changed their tune much. Here they are once again in late 2023 coming out and trying to intimidate people by saying they have the authority of apostles. Every aberrant group in history abuses authority. Every aberrant group in history does this. They claim to have some special commission from God, and you better listen to them, and you better do what they say, or you're going to be in trouble. This is what they're doing. It really doesn't matter how much biblical clarity they have or claim to have. That's not the point, because a lot of people have that. But how many people go around claiming to be apostles or to be functioning as apostles? And when they say function as apostles, they're talking about authority. They're talking about having the power and right to tell people what to do, to go into a church that has an authority structure and to tell that church what to do. Now, what gives them that right? What gives them that right? Well, once again, those who function as apostles among them. What's that? That's their organization. So basically you have to agree to the game to be a part of this. And this is the game they play. We got the authority. We have the ultimate say. We can come in and tell you what to do. We can condemn you among the others and call you a rogue church. We can do all this because we're pretending to be it, and we're trying to convince you we're it, so you will be afraid and you will do what we say. This is what they're doing. It's a fact. It's what they're doing. They might think they have good reason to do it, but it's exactly what they're doing. That's the model. It's a model of intimidation. And this is what they're employing once again. And as I said, their websites, by and large, dwell on this point and come back to this point over and over and over again. Now, how many church organizations and ministries that you know of and have observed operate this way, with this pushy, intimidating attitude of having authority? This is an organization which operates in a certain way. And there are a lot of religious organizations and church organizations and ministry organizations. I know the Methodists have a extra local authority structure that's run by a central organization. And one of the practices of the Methodists is they will assign a pastor to a church for several years, and then he will be transferred. And they will switch pastors around, and pastor families have to move to a new city. That's the deal they've agreed upon. They like that, or they think that works or makes sense. they're faithful to the Methodist vision and they want to serve in the Methodist church, so that's what they do. And people go along with it. They have every right to do that. The difference between the Methodists and the Lord's Recovery is really nothing. They are both religious organizations and really denominations with their own peculiar set of practices and culture and rhetoric, things like that. And the difference is the Methodist Church, although a lot of them probably believe they're the best denomination, why would you be there if you didn't? Other than that, they don't think they're the Lord's unique move on earth. And they don't claim to be the Lord's unique move on earth. And they don't claim that everyone outside of the Methodist organization is in fallen religion and the present evil age and this kind of thing. This is where they're going too far. They are nothing but another religious organization who has every right to exist and follow their practices. But as far as I'm concerned, when they start saying things like that if you leave us, you're in trouble with God and we're the unique move of God on earth, then they start claiming that their leaders are apostles. Well, if they're saying that, they're putting those two together, then they're saying their apostles really have authority over everybody because they're the only true move of God on earth. So therefore, their apostles, or their guys who function as apostles, are the only true holders of that role. And therefore, they have authority over everybody. So the apostles in this area with the Lord's Recovery, or those that function as apostles in the Lord's Recovery in my area, really have authority over me. And I'm a rebel, see? And it was really sad that they felt to bring up John Ingalls and say he led a rebellion. I mean, they pulled out John Ingalls, one of the sweetest, most faithful men to the Lord I've ever been around. And he had a conscience problem with the way they covered up Philip Lee's sexual improprieties. The fact that they made him the manager, the office manager of the Living Stream Ministry, and didn't remove him for a while. They finally did remove him, but they came back and apologized to him for giving him trouble about sexually harassing women in the church. And Ingalls had a conscience problem with that. Well, I would too. Of course, I didn't really know about it because they were trying to cover it up, but the truth has come out, and they are still trying to treat him as an example of some kind of rebellion. Well, who is he rebelling against? What authority was he rebelling against? The Lord's authority? At the very most, he was opposing the authority structure in that organization. Well, that's how the conscience works, guys. That's how it works. Just because you have authority in a church movement or organization doesn't make your authority absolute and doesn't give you the right to, 40 years later, continually be using this person as an example of some kind of rebellion, as if it was a rebellion against God. I mean, that's crazy. That is literally crazy. I can't believe they put this stuff down, and I can't believe that people believe it. I mean, this is 2023. We've got a lot of information now, and information is freely available on the internet that you can look up and study and analyze that wasn't there back in 1988. Okay, there just wasn't the sources of information that there are now. There wasn't the record of witnesses to this stuff that there are now. And sadly, it should be easier now to spot this stuff if you do your homework. But people still get into these groups and people still fall in for it. Why do they do that? Because they want somebody to tell them what to do. They want to believe they're in something that is really, really good and special and not just the same old thing. They just want to believe they're one of the good guys. Well, God made us all the good guys by making us righteous through Christ. Okay, we don't have to go around proving we're good guys anymore. God has already established that. And we all are. We've all been saved. And we're all on the same level. Yes, God has limited authority in the way his church is set up. But it's clear to me that that's on an organizational level. It's not on a universal level. If you hear God speaking through someone, then you need to honor that and pray about it and make a decision based on that. You can watch a video on YouTube of somebody speaking something for the Lord and go, wow, I have never thought about that before. I've never heard that before. Wow. Let me pray about that. And you can get God speaking from that. That's how it works. It doesn't work through some group of assumed apostles going around trying to intimidate people and threaten them with something bad if they don't go along with the program. Okay, the program is God's. It doesn't belong to these guys. But they've been pretending so long it does that they can't even see straight. So this is the way it is. This is the way it is. The Lord's Recovery is another religious organization. That's what it is. They have their authority structure, they have their rules, they have their expectations, they have their practices, they have their culture, they have their rhetoric. And if that's your thing, then that's your thing. But just realize you made a choice to be a part of it. You accepted their authority that they claim to have, and you put yourself under it. You're not obligated by God in an absolute way to be under it. You just aren't. Because God could speak to you to do something different. And guess what? I've said this before. That's called recovery. That's what that is. That's recovery. How do you recover from the Lord's recovery's errors? How do they recover? That's the ironic thing. They don't have any way of recovering because they're locked in. That's the ultimate irony to me. People that bully others and pull rank and get pushy are insecure. The fact that they continue to use this tactic shows that they really do not have faith in their message for all they praise it to resonate. That's it for this time. Thanks again for listening. Take care.